Could Mumen Rider break his limiter? See, over the past few days, I've been thinking about this question. I was originally thinking up YouTube short ideas for the channel, and I came up with this one on the fly. And naturally, I said, no, Bill, that's the most stupid idea you could ever think of. But boy, was I wrong.
Subscribe so I can drop out of college.
Naturally, I thought this video idea was scrapped from the beginning. There's no feasible way that a C-class hero who got absolutely mogged on by the Sea King could ever have the potential to break his own limiter. However, that's when the initial comparisons started to fire, like monkey neurons activating in my head. Satoru, Mumen Rider, really isn't that different from Saitama before his training arc. In fact, Saitama and Satoru were not only similar in appearance, both having short hair and similar build, but also in strength. Mumen Rider is sitting comfortably at the top of Class C, which means he should roughly be capable of taking down wolf-level threats and possibly even tiger threats depending on how high you assess him. Saitama is of a similar level, although slightly higher, having beaten up Crablante, a tiger level threat, relatively easily. And if you consider that a fluke because he got lucky with the eyes or whatever, he also beat a fairly strong foe called the Fish of Darkness in One Punch Man Road to Hero, which pretty comfortably puts him a little bit above Mumen Rider in strength, but still pretty relative. And while we're here, I should add in that Satoru withstood attacks from the Deep Sea King, which left him minorly damaged as a result. And while Saitama is stronger pre-training, Mumen Rider seems to have higher durability, so the strength gap isn't as wide as it seems. There is one pretty big issue that I have left out of the video so far. What the hell even is a limiter? Like, obviously you clicked on the video, so you roughly know what I'm talking about. And while I just mentioned it, you clicked on the video, so could you do me a favor and click the like button too? It helps me in the video out a lot. But none of us actually know anything about limiters and how they work because they just haven't been directly talked about much in the series. But with that being said, we do have some info on it. A limiter is a theoretical barrier that restricts the physical growth of a being. Genis coined the term when he was trying to explain to Saitama how he acquired his strength. In his theory, God imposed a limit on the growth of all human beings because when overwhelming power becomes unbearable for one's body, they inevitably become mindless and crazed monsters. And every creature has a limiter, yet it is possible to remove that limiter. That's not to be confused with being a mysterious being such as Boros or the Deep Sea King, who are non-human and possess high levels of strength. Abnormally powerful humans such as heroes always had the potential to become extraordinarily strong as well. And those who modify their bodies must once again improve past their natural limits, but that does not count as breaking their limits. They have natural physical capabilities far superior to ordinary humans. However, this only means that they have a greater limiter than humans. They did not remove their limiter. Saitama is the only exception to this so far. Saitama was an ordinary person with no talent or potential, but through effort alone removed his natural limits. Being without a limiter, his strength continues to grow non-stop, even at exponential rates upon experiencing intense emotions. And before some of you attempt to say that Garo has broken his limiter, you're wrong. In fact, it's quite literally the opposite. Garo essentially met his limiter before he received his power from God. Garo was essentially granted a buff that just raised his limiter even higher. This idea isn't really speculation either because, to put it simply, when Saitama beats Garo, we see this exact concept at play. For a brief period while they're fighting, we see that Garo and Saitama are pretty evenly matched, seeing their attacks neutralize each other like the serious punch squared attack. However, this level of power is once again brief, and we see this concept at play when the manga brings up these graphs. Originally, we see Garo and Saitama growing at a similarly fast pace. However, since Garo received a buff as opposed to breaking his limiter, Saitama starts exponentially growing once more as a result, seemingly leaving Garo in the dust and rendering his attacks useless. This is the difference between having a high limit and being truly limitless. Now here comes the hard part. How did Saitama break his limiter, and does Mumen Rider have the capabilities to do so as well? Keep in mind that from here on out, the information we're going to talk about will be mostly speculation. Any relevant info about limiters introduced to the series could flop this entire video on its face. But from what I've researched, it seems like it's possible that Mumen could have what it takes to surpass his limiter. You see, to start, aside from Saitama's explanation of his workout routine, there is nothing on what actually caused him to surpass his limit. Both Saitama and Mumen Rider are ordinary guys who don't possess extraordinary skills, but rather willpower. Let me explain. Willpower seems to be the single thing that sets someone aside in terms of being able to surpass their limiter. Saitama demonstrated his indomitable willpower through his 3 years of training. He was in constant pain, could barely move at times, and even vomited blood sometimes, but he kept training. Where Saitama met his limit, he simply refused to accept defeat and essentially nullified his limits. Mumen Rider showed a similar level of indomitable indomitable will in his fight with the Deep Sea King, as despite being extremely outranked, he kept launching all of his most powerful attacks knowing they did next to nothing. And before you downplay the significance of this moment, the premise of what Mumen Rider and Saitama did are essentially the same. They both met their limits, Saitama being his physical strength and Mumen Rider's as well. Saitama's was internal and Satoru's was external, yet they both met their limits in one way or another. And despite the different outcomes, both stood up to their limits, prepared to accept whatever consequences came as a result of that. If an indomitable will is what separates someone with the potential to surpass their limiter, then Mumen Rider seems to possess it as well. And in case you think I'm milking one moment in the anime, think about this. There are so many parallels between the two heroes, both of them having similar looks and builds pre-training, they both have similar strength, and character-wise, they both seem to represent the image of a true hero, someone who stands up against evil no matter the risk. I'm also not coming up with Mumen Rider having indomitable will just out of nowhere. In fact, if you look at the wiki for One Punch Man, you'll notice that both Saitama and Mumen Rider are tagged with indomitable will under the miscellaneous abilities section. There also seem to be various moments in the anime where they acknowledge each other as heroes. When they're riding to the Deep Sea King, Mumen asks if Saitama is scared being separated from Genos, and Saitama asks if Mumen Rider is an S-class hero, which doesn't seem the most significant until the brief pause. Afterwards, Satoru says he's class C, laugh if you want to which Saitama says he would never laugh, thus acknowledging Mumen Rider. We see the opposite when Mumen Rider sends a letter to Saitama and treats him to dinner, which despite Saitama wanting praise for being a hero from the everyday public, he did the true virtuous thing and labeled himself as a cheat to not take the glory away from the other heroes. And for someone who throughout the entire series up until that point wanted a fan base and recognition for his feats, to just give up his chance to be recognized means a lot. And despite that, when he got his letter from Mumen Rider and found out it was him, he seemed genuinely happy, as if Mumen Rider's acknowledgement meant a lot to him. Perhaps receiving that praise from Satoru reminded Saitama of a younger version of himself. This entire scene showing how similar the two are narratively because the two characters are walking the same path of being a true hero. So if I had to give my thoughts on if Mumen Rider could surpass his limiter, it sure seems like he has the qualities that it takes. Subscribe to help me reach my dream of 100K. Thanks.